Now, for more on the trade war between the United States and China, I'm joined by a Firstsource Money Executive Director, Redge Nkosi. Very good evening to you, Redge. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to just pick up off that last soundbite that we heard there from our reporter, Juanita Hunter, and the expert in her piece saying that this could be seen as a silver lining and South Africans shouldn't panic. What do you make of this week's happenings?
Well, firstly, it would be irresponsible for South Africa to ignore the U.S. market. It's a profoundly important one. But at the same time, it is important. South Africa must begin to diversify right up to countries which hasn't been trading so well with. China is a major trading partner for South Africa, and I think South Africa needs to continue in that direction, of course, alongside other BRICS countries. This war between China and the U.S. certainly will affect third countries like South Africa because, as the clip said, the Minister of Trade, the other side, talking to a department, a DTI here, there's a possibility as well that there could be some form of dumping if the U.S. market is completely shut out for China. So South Africa will have to ensure that the Department of Trade and Industry is very much on top of this game. But at the same time, I'm talking in terms of ensuring that there's no dumping whatsoever from China, but at the same time, opening it up for markets right across Asia and South America, of course, some other Northern American countries. So it is an opportunity. There is a silver lining there. It is a time when we can begin to reorient our trade and, of course, our industry policies as well.
And of course, Redge, South Africa is not the only country that has felt the wrath of what is going on in the White House. But we also have our own domestic issues as well when it comes to the GNU. Now, BNP Paribas has also slashed the economic outlook for South Africa, quoting, of course, what is going on internationally, particularly in the United States and the trade wars, but also raising serious concerns about the state of the GNU. What are your thoughts on that?
Firstly, market commentators are slightly different from economists or macroeconomists in the way they understand issues. We do not think simply because the GNU want be together as it's expected, especially if the DA works out, then South African economy is going to sort of get out of steam. That's really not the case. We don't think so. Even if DA was to work out, South Africa can grow for as long as the policies that the Department of Finance and the Treasury, which are the key government entities that really are at the center of growing the economy in terms of their policies, are okay. We don't think these market sentiments that are all over today, they talk of GNU, then tomorrow, the economy is going to flounder. That's not the way economies grow, just merely by some form of sentiments that come from some market players. We think, frankly, South Africa has to change its framework, macroeconomic framework. That is the one at play today and has been at play for quite a while. And South Africa has not mastered that because they listen so much to these market commentators whose ideas, quite frankly, do not assist South Africa. We have not been growing since, in fact, 2008. Not necessarily because of the GNU or not GNU, it's because our framework is out of touch with reality. We are listening too much to the IMF, to the World Bank, whose primary interests are not South Africa. It's essentially to recolonize, if you want, Africa and indeed South Africa. So GNU talks should certainly continue. We want a government that's functioning, there's no doubt. But whether someone should have to reduce growth expectations just because DA pulls out of the GNU is quite frankly not an issue that we should take seriously.
There was also that kind of euphoria after the GNU was announced when it came to the markets as well. There was a lot of talk about investor confidence, about how business will receive it as well. We heard talks about business writing to the president to say that they want a particular party, i.e. the DA, to remain there. You've just explained some reasonings and the intention behind some of these sentiments, but should we still factor in ratings agencies' views of this GNU as it stands? Because it did seem that there was a bit of optimism.
The GNU is an instigation of the business sector here, especially BUSA, working obviously quite close close with the DA, that we should know. And of course, they forced the ANC into it. And they will continue to do that. Our local businesses here are very much in touch with rating agencies, IMF and similar institutions because they have a common agenda. And that agenda is to ensure that the South African economy is primarily in the hands of those they prefer, not supporting the majority Black people. And that is what they've been doing, and they continue to do. All these issues of structural reforms, to a large extent, is a hearsay as to where, because if you look back in 2019, when the Treasury came up with a document about how we should reform the economy, they tried to model out to say, if we do structural reforms in this country, what will be the changes in the economy? Will the economy grow faster or not? What came out of there and what still remains is that the economy won't change in any fundamental way at all if we carry on these reforms. So when we hear about GNU, when we hear about rating agencies, we hear about Business South Africa and the DA working together, wanting the influencing policy in this country, it's not new. All they want at the end of the day is to benefit themselves, not the economy broadly. These are market people. These are persons and individuals and institutions or organizations that to a large extent are there for a quick buck, not to support the economy broadly speaking.
Going back to matters further afield that will affect us as well when it comes to the Trump administration, his feelings regarding South Africa are not a secret at all. And even post this pause, this 90-day pause, he's still on social media posting misinformation, talking about land grabs that are happening in South Africa. Of course, all things that aren't true. So we know his thoughts and sentiments about the country. Post this 90 days, as much as we're saying we cannot ignore the US markets, how viable will they be if there is a head of state who is adamant that they do not want to engage in a fair way with this country?
I think what's of interest is that the Europeans in this country, Carrie Creel, DA, and many of those people have been going to the US, influencing Trump. The South Africans in the US, in the form of Elon Musk, and a few others, influencing Donald Trump and a few others, they actually have one common agenda. The agenda is essentially to deny the African majority here economic prospects which they should actually be having. And to that extent, they will continue doing that. And Trump is going to be able to continue influencing policy in this country in the manner he deems appropriate. But I think what is important is South Africans must stand up and say it is in the national interest to grow the economy by ensuring that land is taken away from those who have taken the land from the African people and restored back to them. It cannot be that we're just influenced all over as a country. Frankly, that won't help us and will not be able to grow the economy as we should. We should begin to ignore such calls by the European South Africans who travel to the US. We should ignore the calls by European South Africans who continue to talk language of the markets, thinking that by saying, well, the rand is going to collapse and so on and so forth, then threatening or blackmailing the entire economy as a consequence of that. I think South African government has to take one thing into account. They have to ensure that the South African majority are in good economic position, which I'm afraid they're not. They're not benefiting, this we know. And frankly, then the government has to ensure that they do exactly that and have positive prospects for the broad majority of the people and stop just listening to influences from the many Europeans who go about bad-mouthing South Africa just for their own good.
Redge Nkosi, appreciate your insights as always.